Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jake and today we are going to be once again talking about Fable. Now obviously the Fable Direct was about a week ago now, and after reflecting on it a little bit and also replaying Fable Anniversary again, I have come to the conclusion that there are quite a few questions that have gone unanswered that I would like to hear answers for. So today I'm just going to record this video and kind of ask 20 questions that I would like to ask if I was given the opportunity to talk to the developers behind the game. And I guess it's also just a kind of wish list of things I'd like to see, maybe in Summer Games Fest or something, just to see whether features are confirmed or not. Because obviously the direct we got was quite short. It was only 10 minutes long, which is a lot shorter than something like Starfield Direct, which was almost an hour. So I do feel like they couldn't show off too much of the game, so these questions are, bound to still be asked. But again, hopefully we'll see more on that closer to launch. Now real quickly, before I jump into this, I do just want to say, if you end up enjoying this video or getting something out of it, please consider hitting that subscribe button because that does help me out so much. I really want to build a community here where we can discuss video games and talk about the newest ones coming out, and also just review the newest ones that are also out, so please be sure to hit that subscribe button because that does help this channel out so much. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this because I have 20 burning questions that I would like to ask the developers of Fable. So my first question would be about evicting. What is the point of evicting a resident other than just, being evil and being a dick? We know from the showcase that if you evict someone, you can actually find them on the street later on and they'll be homeless and they won't like you very much, obviously. But what do you actually get from evicting people? Like, for example, are there bad residents that, maybe won't pay their rent on time or will just mess up the property and cause, kind of issues to you and such? Is there any reason to ever actually evict anyone from the household? That's what I really want to know. And kind of a part 2 question to this that I didn't actually write down, but I just want to ask anyway, would be, how does the renting system work? Can I add value to my property by decorating the property nicer or putting trophies up on the wall or anything like that? Can I add more value to this so they have to pay more rent? And can I actually control the rent as well? Like, how much can I increase the rent here? Will people just leave if I start charging them too much? I'm really curious about the entire renting system in general and like how far can you push that? How deep does it actually go? My second question is about marriage and what kind of consequences it has. For example, if you flirt with other women, will your wife ask you for a divorce? Will she get mad at you and pissed off at you? Does she expect you to be home a certain amount of time? Is that kind of like a happiness meter here where if you spend more time at home, your wife is more happy? Whereas if you're out adventuring all the time, maybe, the happiness meter goes down. Do you have expectations in the marriage, like providing money for your family? Will your wife get annoyed if you're not, giving enough money at home? Once again, similar to the evicting thing, I kind of just want to know how deep this system goes. Is it just a surface layer, like, yeah, you can get married and you can get divorced? Or is it a bit more in depth than that? Do you actually have to keep your spouse happy? Otherwise, they're going to ask you for a divorce. And I guess a part 2 to this question as well would be about the kids. Is it the same with the kids? Do you have to keep your kids happy? If you have a divorce and you already have kids, who gets the kids? Does your wife leave with the kids or your spouse? Or do the kids just stay with you? Again, I'm not really sure how this would work. But again, I just want to know how in-depth it goes. In an ideal world, it would be a super in-depth system where, you have to keep your spouse happy, you have to be home enough, and, they can take the kids, and they can even ask for alimony, just crazy stuff like that. I know that's like a crazy wish list. I highly doubt that's going to be as deep in the game. But it's definitely something I'd like to see explored more. The renting system and the marriage system, I would like a really in-depth showcase on. So my next couple of questions are kind of about the map in general. So first of all, how big is this map? Is it, ginormous? Now we know from an interview with IGN that it is actually smaller than the Horizon maps, which is kind of to be expected because in those games you're driving super fast sports cars, whereas on this you're probably going to be on horseback quite a lot. But still, I'm just kind of curious how big the map is. How many biomes are there / like regions? Are there offshore areas as well, like little islands that you can get to potentially, like the Witchwoods? I just want to know, like, using Skyrim as a benchmark, how immersive is this map? If I walk into a forest, does it actually feel like a forest, like, the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 game does really well? Or does it just feel like a very small section of the map and it's not super, immersive in that sense? It is all going to depend on how big the map is, how big they can make certain biomes and stuff. So I don't know, an overview of the entire map would be great to see at some point. My next question would be, how will we get around the map in general? Because we know in the earlier games you can teleport around the map. And that, of course, is super useful for getting to places like Witchwoods where it's like in a separate island and you have to, teleport to get there. I'm curious how we'll get around the map in this game. Does teleporting return? Can you teleport from anywhere similar to Fable Anniversary? Or is it going to be a much more modern take where there's just simple fast travel with like no teleport animation or anything like that? Will we have boats so we can actually like sail between different islands? I'm just curious. Again, this relates to how big the map is, but how are we actually going to get around from point to point relatively quickly? I'm very curious to see what they do here. Now, my next question is in reference to the size of the game as well. How many quests actually are there in this? I want to know a rough idea of how big this game is aiming to be. Now, obviously, if the marriage system is as in-depth as I would like it to be, if the renting system is super in-depth as well, it would be okay if the game was a lot smaller on the quest side of things. I just really want to know for reference just how big of a game we're going for here. Roughly how long is it going to take the average player to get through this experience? Now, of course, bigger doesn't always mean better, if I'm not expecting like a 100-hour game here, I don't think I'd even want that actually. And again, especially if those systems, between the quests and stuff, the actual open world and the NPCs are a lot more in-depth as well, that's going to be great. But I'd just like some idea of the scale of everything here, just how long this game would take roughly the average person to beat. My next question, also in reference to that as well, is how many enemy types are there in this game? Obviously we know of a few, they're bringing back a few classics and also adding a new few ones here that we've seen in the Direct. But I'm curious overall, how many different enemy types are there? Is there going to be a lot of variety in the world to, enemies that we're going to be finding? How close are we to approaching that Witcher 3 level of enemy variety? My next question is also about enemies and whether they will respawn in the world in general, because we know this time it's open world, it's not zone based like the previous games. So when you're walking along a path, maybe you'll come across a band of hobs or something. Will they respawn? Will other enemies take their place in that location? Or are spawns just randomly procedurally generated in certain regions? I want to know how the enemy spawning works in general. If I go and clear out a dungeon, will enemies respawn in that dungeon, or is that dungeon cleared out forever? And in just general, when you're exploring that open world, do enemies respawn along the tracks? Or again, once you clear out a region, is it cleared out forever? And my next question, also in relation to that as well, is do enemies randomly wander the world, or are there set locations? So, for example, like I said, if I find a group of hobs, if they respawn, will I find them in that same location again, or do they just kind of wander? Now, I imagine certain enemies are going to be region-based, so for example, in the swampy area, you'll find a certain set of enemies, and then in the forest, you'll find another certain set. But are they always going to be spawning in the same location? Like, for example, will there always be an enemy by a certain rock, or an enemy by a certain tree, or enemies outside of this specific cave? Or do they kind of wander around in their biomes a bit more freely, so every time you come across them, it's in a different place? My next question is morphing. Is there any morphing in this game at all? So obviously we know that there is no good or evil, there's no black and white in this game, which is a little bit subjective. The core of Fable has always been the fact that there is a objective good and evil to every single choice you make. So it's interesting they're not doing that with this game, but obviously that morphing isn't coming back because it wouldn't make as much sense in this one. But is there any morphing at all? So for example, can I build up my character's strength? Will I visibly see them get stronger, build up bigger muscles? Or maybe if I spec into will they get those kind of magic glowing, scars that they get and such? And scars in general. Will my character develop scars from combat throughout the course of the game? Just character morphing in general, outside of the good and evil, is there any kind of character morphing in this? I'd also really like to know about silver chests. Are they going to be returning in this game? As you know, throughout the Fable series, you can find silver keys that, you can use to open chests, which give you special loot, and you require a certain amount of keys to open, certain chests. So for example, you'll find a chest that will require 5 silver keys and then another requires 10. Is that going to be making a return in this reboot or no? And speaking of returning stuff, are demon doors going to be returning? Now I would have to imagine that they are going to be returning. It would be kind of silly if they weren't. Again, there's something that's like such a staple to Fable to me. But obviously we didn't see any sign of them in the Direct, so it does leave me with that question, are they going to be returning in this game, or are they simply gone forever? I really hope they're returning. I won't lie, I will be a little bit disappointed if they're not here. It's not going to be like an instant I'm not going to buy this game or whatever, or make me hate it, but I just feel like they're very important to the core experience of Fable. And speaking of that, is fishing returning as well? Again, it's a small thing, but it's something that I like doing a lot in these games. So I just have to ask the question, is fishing going to be returning in this reboot? And if so, how is it going to work? Are there going to be dedicated fishing spots where, you'll see ripples in the water and you can, throw your fishing rod in and maybe you'll get some special loot, or maybe you'll actually catch a fish? Or are you going to be able to fish anywhere? How does the fishing work if it's returning at all? And also, I'd like to know about graves. Can I go grave robbing with a shovel? Again, this is something that I spent a lot of time doing in the games when I played them. You can get some surprisingly good loot, some people get buried with really good stuff, which is really selfish of them actually, but I really hope grave robbing is returning because, man, I love their features so much. Also, just reading the graves in general. I really enjoy going around and just, looking at all the tombstones. The sense of humor in this game is just so good. It just works so well with some of them. So I really hope that is returning as well. Now, my final set of questions are all to do with the crime and punishment system and how in-depth this kind of goes. So just to start, I'll ask the super basic question. How does stealing and breaking and entering work? Can I buy lockpicks and just pick lock into someone's house or a business and then just steal things similar to in Skyrim, you can lockpick in and then lockpick display cases and take stuff straight from the shop? What happens if I'm caught stealing, how does the bounty system and stuff work? The next question is about bounties in general. How does it work? So for example, if I'm caught breaking into someone's house or stealing something, do I instantly get a bounty if someone sees me commit a crime? If I murder someone in the middle of nowhere, but someone happens to see, will I instantly get a bounty? Or is it similar to Red Dead where people will have to run and actually tell the guards, giving me a chance to stop them? And that actually leads me into my next question as well, which is a really important one for me. Is there a jail system in this game? Ever since I played Skyrim as a kid, I've always wanted a jail system in every game that I've ever played. It just adds so much to the world, like being able to actually get arrested and go to jail, and there's actual consequences for that. Maybe you just waste time, maybe you lose skills, maybe you lose money. Whatever it is, going to jail is such a needed feature in every RPG, and when a game doesn't have that, I just feel a little bit disappointed. So, will there be a jail system in Fable? Can I get locked up, or is it just going to be bounties? And my next question is, what happens if I kill a shopkeeper or someone important? Will they respawn or get replaced, or are they just gone forever? Now, like I said, I'm playing Fable Anniversary again, and in that game, when you kill a shopkeeper, you can actually buy their store and then, rent it out. And eventually they will respawn, and then they'll kind of run the store for you. Is that going to work similar in this Fable reboot, or is it just going to be that they're simply gone forever? And my next question is, how does that work in general with everybody? Because we know there's over 1,000 NPCs, and they're all handcrafted to have their own personalities, likes and dislikes. So if I kill a random NPC, are they just gone from the game forever, or do they get replaced by someone who gets procedurally generated in, or do they simply respawn? Especially important NPCs, but even just, random NPCs. And if that's the case, theoretically then, can I go around the world and kill literally everyone so that no one is alive? I just really want to know how deep the freedom of choice goes here, and especially the crime system as well. Is there a lot of depth to it, or is it all surface level? Those are very, very important questions to me. Especially, since there's no objective good or bad morality, I feel like the crime system has to be really fleshed out to make up for that. So I'm hoping that, again, we'll get a deep dive on this game at some point and they'll go into all of these mechanics. But that is about it. That is about all the questions that I have to ask the developers. Those are my kind of burning questions anyway that I really want to know before I confidently buy the game. And I'm hoping to get good answers on them soon. I really am, because this game looks very promising. From the 10 minutes we saw, visually it looks outstanding. I love the passion that they clearly have for the game. All around, it just looks really, really good. But these questions to me are super, super important, because that's going to make or break this game. Because all of these mechanics, like renting houses, getting married, getting divorced, the quests themselves, and especially the crime and punishment, they all need to be really fleshed out for this game to live up to the hype in my eyes. Because to me, Fable has always been about that. Those are the mechanics that stand out the most. The fact that I can, grow horns and grow an angel kind of ring or whatever above my head. The visual morphing is obviously important to me, but it's not as important as the other systems. And I really want to see those brought up to the next gen level. I really, really want to see them fully fleshed out and just so much depth in them. And I know at a certain point what I'm asking for is just completely unrealistic. There's only so much that can go into a game, so much time, so much money, so much development resources. But I don't think what I'm asking for is super unrealistic. I just want a fully fleshed out crime and punishment system so that you can in fact go to prison and you do serve time, and you don't just get a bounty for committing a crime in front of someone, they actually have to go and report you. But I also want to see an in-depth marriage system. If I choose to get married, there has to be consequences to that. Maybe my spouse will expect me to be home more often, and I have to make them happy by constantly bringing them gifts and money and just showing affection towards them. Otherwise, they may end up divorcing me, and maybe they take half of my assets. If I own, 6 businesses, maybe my spouse would take half of them when we divorce, and also my house and my kids as well. I really just want to see consequences here, outside of the quest. I want to see actual consequences for things that I do. If I choose to steal something, throw me in jail. If I get married and then neglect that marriage, let me have consequences for that. Get divorced, have to pay alimony or rent or something, or lose half of my assets. Make me have to be smart when I'm committing crimes. If I choose to do an evil playthrough and I just want to murder people, make me have to be smart about that. I can't have any witnesses, and if there are witnesses, I have to kill them before they report me. Let the bounty system actually be interesting. So for example, if I owe a bounty in one town, maybe I have to change my outfit when I go back, or my hair or something. I have to wear some kind of disguise so I'm not instantly noticed by the guards. So as it stands right now, I am not completely sold on Fable. I like what I see, I feel positively about it, but I'm not completely sold like I said in my initial video, and that is because of these reasons. I need to know how deep these mechanics go before I can confidently say I want to buy this on day one. Because I don't think for me personally it's going to be enough if it's like kind of those mechanics are just very surface level. Like you have your quests which are going to be fun, the world looks really beautiful, the combat looks fun. But if those mechanics are just surface level, like, okay, I can get married, but then I don't really have to think about it, and then if I want to get divorced, I can, or maybe I rent out a property and I can just evict someone because I want to be a dick, that's great and all, but I need reasons to do that as well. I need it to be engaging beyond just, having it there for the sake of it. So I'm really hoping, just to get more information on this, I need to see a deep dive on this game on how these mechanics work, how deep they are, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be waiting for. But let me know what you think down below. If you have any questions that you think I missed, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. What do you want to know about this game? What is most important to you about Fable? Is there anything the developers haven't shown off or talked about that kind of makes you worried maybe it won't be in the game? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like. And like I said at the beginning, don't forget to hit that subscribe button too, because that does help me out so much. I would really love to do this as a job someday, so you hitting that subscribe button does bring me one step closer to achieving that dream. I hope you found this video entertaining. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Jake, and I will see you next time.
Oh dear.